Sunrise 4 a.m. You see, get in the car, we can run away. I hardly even knew you, but I knew that I can't lose you. For 1 or 2.
Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing? I'm really glad you're here because we're going to visit one of the most well-preserved pieces of Moorish and Islamic architecture. The Alhambra, as it is called, is a citadel on top of the city of Granada, and I'm really ecstatic to see the gardens and the connection between the gardens and the interior spaces and the water. I think it's going to be a really sensory experience, so I'm really excited for that. I'm actually going to make some sandwiches right now so I don't have to buy overpriced food. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I think I will. Let's not forget the sandwich. I'm ready. Let's go. Now it's like a proper workout. You just go up the hill. But then as soon as you go through the door, it's like even steeper. I found out recently that Granada in Spanish actually means pomegranate, so it's not surprising that this is the door of the pomegranates. Don't be discouraged by the thick walls. Just like a pomegranate, they have some sweet stuff on the inside. Right at the entrance, there was these gorgeous scale models showing the advantaged position of the Alhambra over the city. And some say it just wasn't built higher on the hill because they needed enough water pressure for the residents and beautiful gardens to thrive. But I just like looking at how tiny everything looks. It's such a good model. An even more amazing one showed evolution over the centuries. The first being only an isolated fortress, the Alcazaba, which is the oldest part of the Alhambra, and some believe it was built in the Roman times. The next one shows a huge expansion of the walls, and bigger towers now have better visibility over the city, and the biggest one housed the Sultan Muhammad, the founder of the Nasrid dynasty, which ruled Andalusia for quite a while. Foundations of the palaces and other administrative buildings can now be seen, which were shortly constructed, and by this time, guys, the Alhambra was already a small city with like 1,500 inhabitants. This is actually where we're standing right now. This larger scale model shows all of the smaller buildings in more detail. Honestly, I know it may sound weird, but I just wanted to hug these models all along. They're so nice! After the Sultan was expelled by the Catholic monarchy and the Nasrid dynasty came to an end, that's when the classical architecture began to be wedged into the city like that. I want you to notice how overbearing it looks compared to everything else. We will talk a lot more about that soon. For now, I just want to point out where we are. This is the path we came up from. The Alcazaba is right at the front. The palaces are just there. And the palace of Charles V is actually not here, but it would be here. And this is the path we're gonna take to get there. The Moors were Muslims specifically from North Africa who crossed into the Iberian Peninsula and ruled the whole of Andalusia from this very ground we're standing on right now. A lot of the architecture we'll see here has direct roots in desert architecture. The use of rammed earth, for example, and clever techniques to passively keep rooms cool in summer and warm in winter. Both things that, in all of our modernity, we could still learn a lot from, by the way. Some of the ruins actually became planters. I thought that was quite cute. Whilst others are just bare, in the condition that it was left in after the destruction. It survived explosions, earthquakes, fires. It's been seized and inhabited by, let's just say, some disrespectful guests. And this is it, the Palace of Charles V. The Alhambra was seen as such a big prize for conquering back the Andalusia region. The king could not help but want a residence here. But the land it sits on are parts of the Alhambra that will forever be forgotten. And though the Alcazaba is huge, and the view's absolutely magnificent, I'll be honest, there was not much that I could see from the palace from the outside. It actually looked quite modest. I certainly had no idea what was waiting for me. That in Spanish is called tapial. It's a sort of rammed earth that's similar to concrete, is lime, sand, and stones. Before you even enter, you're already drawn to the craftsmanship. The first room we enter was kind of like the council room. It's the oldest room in the whole palace, but it's also been the most changed over the centuries. The royal courts of justice would have met here, but when the Catholics took over, they turned it into a chapel. The room is now quite dark, but before it is believed to have been lit by this huge stained glass on the ceiling. And the small room adjacent to it was the oratory. Notice how it's slightly slanted towards southeast because it needed to face Mecca. From the darkness, you see this golden light just shining through this door, and that's when we arrive at the first courtyard. The decoration is just breathtaking. There is so much detail and they're perfectly lit by a soft light and shade provided by the portico and wide overhangs. The sound of water is ever present, but the proportions are just perfect. I mean, look at that. My first thought here was, oh my god, this is a maze. And yeah, it's supposed to be a defensive mechanism against invaders. To me, there is nothing more delicious than an overdose of detail. Islamic art refrains from figurative images of the Quran as it is not allowed, and so instead they use infinite patterns and more abstract shapes, but that does not mean they convey any less meaning. A lot of their core messages are actually quite simple and often conveyed through nature. And my favorite description I've heard so far is that Islamic art is an art at rest, where all tension is dissipated. Which is true. These shapes often offer a certain balance that I feel like we all lack and need. Time to talk about the most important room in the palace. This room is where most of the politics happened, where ambassadors and visitors would wait to see the Sultan, and where he also sat at the very back against the lights so he could see you and you couldn't see him. The room itself is very dark. It gets a lot more light during the winter when the sun's lower and it can actually peek through those holes in the window. And although it seems it was designed to be disguised as a watchtower, the deep window holes actually gave it away for what it really is. Otherwise, the structure would be too weak for it to be a watchtower. The window screens were great to protect women's privacy, whilst allowing them to still have a look outside when they wanted to. After all, the view isn't bad at all. The water, just like a mirage in the desert, paired with the greenery, kind of resembles an oasis. Remember the desert architecture we were talking about? Yeah. Or are you gonna say the columns and the arches don't look like a crisp palm tree canopy? Perhaps because the concept is based on a natural environment, that's why they've nailed the human scale so well. Unlike that building back there, the Palace of Charles V. Yes, it's humongous, and to be honest, it kind of ruined the view here. Nevertheless, this courtyard was a super experience no matter what way I looked at it. Okay, hold up. You're telling me that a white hallway turned into that? I want to know whose genius idea was that, because they deserve a prize. Nobody that passed through that door was expecting this. And I swear never in my life I'd seen so many columns in a single space. And they were so delicate and light that I actually doubted they were all structural. But they are. The arches aren't though. But the thing is that if you spread them with enough regularity, you can thin them out and in turn make the building look so much lighter than it actually is. My teacher once said one thing that stuck with me, and it was, if you want to know the quality of a design, look at how the building touches the ground. The lion spewing water generally is an allusion to the sun from which all life comes from. But in this fountain in particular, the 12 lions actually stand for the 12 sons of the zodiac, coexisting at the same time. It's integrated with smaller fountains on all of the surrounding rooms, from which the water springs freshly from the ground and then slowly makes its way back into the center. Now, I want to know who kept in mind the concept of the pomegranate, with the thick skin and shiny little bits on the inside. I guess this could have many reasons: privacy, safety, but one of my favorite analogies by anthropologist Pierre Guichard says that the dwelling tells a lot about the structure of the family in those days, turned inwards upon itself around the central courtyard with all the rooms opening onto it. All of the detailed decoration that we've seen so far is either stucco or wood. It's very rare to find stone, for example, not because of scarcity or even costs, but because more porous materials allow some air to pass through them, absorb certain impurities, are a great backdrop for your photo, and they also survive drastic changes in humidity. They're not only more malleable to work with in the first place, but also easier and cheaper to repair. This is one of the most beautiful ceilings in all of the Alhambra in my opinion, and it also acts as a sundial. They say that no two people can ever see the same thing when they look at it, because every tiniest angle and every second that goes by, the honeycomb structure will interact differently with the light. These are believed to have been their living spaces. They would have never been filled with furniture, but only tapestries and low tables. And because everything is so delicate, they always offer these tactile points so we can touch it. The different style here indicates that this was already built by the Catholics, although the garden was already there. With the omnipresence of water, I can guarantee you these people were never thirsty. But seriously speaking, their water technology was actually quite advanced for their time. They engineered a system to bring flowing water from the surrounding mountains, which was quite a revolution to the city. And this is the right time to be talking about water, because now we are approaching the baths. No idea what's happening there, but it doesn't look very secure. It's interesting to see the integration of both cultures in some of these extensions. I thought we were gonna be able to see more of the baths, to be honest, but a lot of the places were actually cordoned off. But we could still see the original tiles and the columns, and those little bits in the ceiling open to release steam whenever there was too much. This was like the true maze. This part of the building had to be so structurally sound because of the extreme hot temperatures of the furnace. And as we come out of the palaces, we find this beautiful garden. Apparently there was stuff constructed here, but it got destroyed unfortunately. Nevertheless, the garden was extremely beautiful, and you can see the water flowing and keeping everything evergreen. And now we're heading to the Alcazaba, which is the oldest part of the Alhambra. And this gate is the threshold between the new and the old. And as we go up, we pass through these ruins that look like the guards' residences and other places like baths as well. We're heading up there, and in the staircase they framed everything so nicely. It's a little strange still to look back and see all that patchwork of structure behind us, the leftovers of what was once revolutionary engineering. That was actually the main entrance to the Alhambra for a long time, and standing on this huge Titanic, you can only imagine the guards watching out for other troops invading their territory, along with everything else that's happened on these lands. That bell only rang a few times, thankfully. And as soon as I recorded this, my camera died. Thankfully, I managed to turn it back on and get a few images of the palace of Charles V. I know, I judge this so much, but I want to say that I am an avid lover of classical architecture. And although I do not agree with the contextual studies that this architect conducted, I still find it breathtakingly beautiful. The architect Pedro Machuca actually trained under Michelangelo in Italy, so it's not a surprise that the proportions and the shapes and the angles just feel so grand. Although Charles V was the one who commissioned it, he never got to live here because it took a while to build this building. It was actually abandoned and left unroofed until the 1920s, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, and have you noticed the materiality of those columns? How stunning is this terrazzo looking? Look. It's my favorite part by far. Thankfully, I'm back and alive. I heard this lady on the way out saying that just inside the Alhambra she did 24 kilometers. I don't know if that's possible, but it feels possible. My legs are just knackered and I'm just so exhausted, really. I feel like it was also a really stimulating experience. I think the palaces were really touching to me because there's so much decoration and everything is so gorgeous, and there's water and the sounds and the textures and the light, and just everything felt really magical and from a different world, really. I mean, it is quite old. I think we can consider that it is from a different world. And thank you so much for watching this video, guys. I'm really thankful for having you guys here with me and being able to share these experiences. Subscribe if you want to stick around, give me a like if you like the video, and I'll see you next time. Bye!